A few days after a top 5 win on the road, Ohio State set to hit the practice field on Tuesday as it prepares for Purdue. Ryan Day said the Buckeyes have to turn the page and get to Purdue. The Penn State game was over. That's the 41-year vet Tim May. That's Andy Backstrom on Spencer Holbrook. Ryan Day also mentioned that this is their offensive line moving forward. Even if Zen Michalski comes back, he will be an option. But they're rolling with Carson Hinsman at left guard, Donovan Jackson at left tackle. How did that hit your ears, Andy?
Seems like the right decision. They had a great game. They both graded out champions, being Donovan Jackson at left tackle, Carson Hinsman at left guard. It feels like, a big question we've been hearing is, why did it take them this long to figure out that Carson Hinsman should play guard? Well, I think in the offseason, you have training camp illness that swept through the offensive line room. Carson Hinsman misses some time there. They really like what Tegra Shabola gave them at right guard. They roll with Tegra Shabola there. And also remember that Carson Hinsman was competing for the center job with Seth McLaughlin. Mm-hmm. So they had him at the backup center spot. And then the injuries happened to the left tackle positions and kind of thrust Carson Hinsman right there. But he was there all along. They weren't, maybe he wasn't as forgotten in this building as he was maybe for fans that weren't hearing his name as much as they did last season. But now they're really happy with the opportunity he has. I thought it was interesting, too, that Ryan Day admitted that a big reason why they went with Carson Hinsman wasn't because he was, blowing away the competition in practice. It's just they were leaning on the experience he had of starting in those big road game atmospheres. They were really hoping that would pan out, and it did. And as Ryan Day said, that's life. You get an opportunity, you run with it, and he did. And now he's the starting left guard at Ohio State.
Yeah, it made all the sense in the world. So I talked about it before the game. Carson Hinsman had, more than anything else, he had the experience. He was a starter for you for 12 games last year. That says a lot about him. But bottom line is, I'm not surprised. He has earned that left guard spot. The way I look at it, I'm not sure Ryan Day could have said anything other than what he said today. They're going to ride with the horse they've got right now, both at left guard and left tackle.
Yeah, it's interesting that there are other options. They could go back to other things, but when you play that well, there was no other option really other than to roll with these guys. And now you roll into a Purdue matchup. I believe the Boilermakers are 121st against the run this year, so you're going to be able to get some more confidence this week grading the road, hopefully running the ball pretty well this week as well. As for Tegra Shabola, the only offensive lineman, Andy, who did not become an offensive player of the game, Ryan Day said that this isn't a feel-good moment for this offensive line. Tegra is the only one that didn't grade out as a champion. If you don't grade out as a champion, which is 80% or higher, you don't get the right to be the player of the game, and you can't be in the running for that. I like that message. Just because you were part of the offensive line doesn't mean that you get that award. You didn't grade out a champion. But that kind of clears up that. But they said that he did some good things. They liked what he did. He just didn't grade out a champion, so he couldn't be an offensive player of the game with the other 4 starters along the offensive line. I
thought it was interestingly timed. I mean, normally we don't get the grades, right? So we don't know who's graded out a champion or not unless Ryan Day says it or he's asked about it. So that was interesting that it was kind of a reveal of, okay, these 4 guys did, this one didn't. But, Ryan Day also affirmed that, hey, Tegra's our right guard going forward. He was asked that directly. He confirmed that. They still really like what Tegra Shabola did. I thought he played really well on Saturday against Penn State. I don't think any lineman stuck out of being like, they didn't have a good day. And that's usually when your offensive line is playing really well. I mean, that's the thing that Ryan Day said after the game. I'll have to watch the tape on Carson Hinsman, but I didn't notice him. That's a good thing when you're a guard. Yeah. That's the same way I felt about Tegra Shabola, but I'm not paid to coach football, so maybe they saw some things they didn't like, have to clean up a little bit. But as you said, Purdue game, great opportunity. Northwestern game, great opportunity. A couple good weeks for this offensive line to improve. Also, Donovan Jackson, Ryan Day said, he thinks he can be a pretty good tackle. Yeah. And, he's got to clean some things up overall, but I think it's going to be really fun to watch the next 2 weeks to see how he does. His athleticism out there. I think Carson Hinsman said it best. You go from being in a phone booth to being out on an island, and that's kind of the transition that he's making right now.
What if there's a phone booth on an island, Tim?
Then you line up and play like they played on that last drive. I thought all 5 of them played extremely well in the last drive, which was the clinching moment in that game, playing keep away. And, I think they've stumbled into a really good offensive line. Yeah. Stumbled made the right term. Because Carson Hinsman always had that experience factor on his resume. Like you said, he got basically delayed. His beginning of the year was retarded by the fact of the illness that went through the offensive line room at the hotel or wherever they were picking this thing up. But the bottom line was, I think he showed. Another thing that stood out about what Ryan Day was talking about Carson Hinsman is he's playing guard, not center. when you're playing center, and especially the way he was thrust into it last year, first-time starter, et cetera, a lot of stuff is going through your brain. A lot of times you barely get back to square one before the snap is called. And him just having an assignment and carrying it out, and he is farm strong. He grew up on a dairy farm, but he is farm strong, and I think he displayed that many times on Saturday, just the brute strength he brings to that position. So, like I said, I don't think there's a debate at this moment what their starting lineup looks like across the front.
Is this a new shirt?
Why?
It's nice. I like it. You look good in it, too.
Well, I don't know. It's everybody keeps yelling at me, quit wearing those plaids. Why don't you wear some solid colors?
I'm being serious on camera here.
Yeah.
It looks nice. It's a new shirt. I like it.
I'm mainly talking about my wife and some of my friends, not people on YouTube.
Well, she's going to be mad when she watches this.
They're too worried about me interrupting you.
Oh, okay. Well, she's going to be mad
and
when she watches
I don't pay attention to them.
Okay.
Obviously.
Okay. Well, as for the defense, as Tim plays defense a little bit there,
no, I was pretty offensive.
Re-engineered is the word Ryan Day used. He did say started from scratch, and then he kind of backpedaled pretty fiercely there. They didn't just scrap the entire defensive playbook and go a different direction. But it is clear that they are changing things up. There was one of the Penn State offensive linemen mentioned after the game that Ohio State threw some different looks at them that they hadn't seen, some different different things that they were doing up front that Penn State had not seen, kind of jammed the run game there. Jim Knowles bringing some pressure from different angles that we hadn't seen, different looks, different formations, different players in different roles. They've clearly changed things, Andy, from the Oregon game. Ryan Day said, again, re-engineered, started from scratch, and then he said, you don't just change everything, but you do reevaluate things. Jim Knowles kind of confirmed that too, and I think it's for the best right now.
You had to make changes after the Oregon game. That was the whole point of having that off week and trying to make the most of it. And Jim Knowles also confirmed, as he was asked, are you going back to more the way you called your defenses at Oklahoma State? He said there's some truth in that. And I think that there's probably a comfortability for him doing that, mixing up more of those blitz packages, getting more creative on the defensive front with stunts. We've seen it the last 2 weeks, and it's paid off for this defense. And quickly, it was basically the scapegoat against Oregon, and now it's deserving of the praise it's gotten the last 2 weeks. The way that game ended with the goal line stand, a third game in a row with a goal line stand. And not only that, one thing I was thinking about this week is, look, when they didn't have Tyleik Williams for a couple games earlier this year, it was obvious that he was not there. Yeah. And you saw that defensive interior kind of struggle with guys that had to step up, whether it was Caden McDonald, Hero Kanu, Tyler Malone go down the line. This time, Tyleik Williams goes out of the game at a critical point, and that defensive interior really stepped up with some of those reserve guys in a moment like that. And I think, whether it's injuries at defensive tackle or offensive line, this depth of the Ohio State team has really gotten to show its stripes a little bit through those reps they've gotten earlier in the season.
Yeah, and the other thing is that, you're not running stunts in a goal line stand either. You're getting after it.
Yeah.
Caden McDonald is a great example of getting after it. We talked about that yesterday on our widely circulated podcast. But the bottom line is, Cody Simon said it, remember, after the Oregon game or after the next game, that he thought they'd gotten kind of stagnant with their defense at points against Oregon, which means you're kind of like predictable where you're going to be and what you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
It is the way I take stagnant, especially the way it was explained by Ryan Day and even Jim Knowles today. They're anything but stagnant, but they're not doing wild stuff. They're not doing crazy stuff. They're putting really good athletes in position to make plays, to chase plays in some respects. And there was never a better example than the way they played the fourth down play in the goal line stand. That was an extremely well-prepared defense with two really good safeties who took away the primary and then knocked down the secondary read on that play. Meanwhile, the defensive front was doing its thing. So, it's funny, as the old saying goes, when a plan comes together, and it really came together on that play. They weren't paying attention to that number 71 coming in motion because he couldn't catch a pass. He's not eligible. And then number two, maybe he could get a handoff, but they're not going to do that with him in that situation with the season on the line. So the way that defense evolved, as you pointed out in your analysis of that goal line stand, the way the defense just evolved through those four plays was cool to watch.
Yeah.
It was a veteran defense.
I think that goal line stand was a seminal moment for a lot of these guys. But
plus the gutter roll. just punch you got to have down there.
Yeah, I think it was a seminal moment for a lot of these guys because of the way that not only they stood tall at the 1 yard line there, but like that's a springboard moment for Caden McDonald. It's a moment of confidence for CJ Hicks that they trusted him on the field for 2 of those 4 downs. It's a good point of confidence for Caleb Downs, who makes the play of the game. He doesn't need any of that, but it shows the worth of Lathan Ransom, having him out there snuffing that out and not letting Tyler Warren get that ball because Drew Aller knew that it was going to be taken away. Like a lot of things were going into that, but especially up front where you don't have Tyleek Williams, who I get into now. He's day-to-day, Ryan Day said. I don't know if he's going to play against Purdue. I don't think it matters.
No. Yeah.
But if he does, then that's the good day-to-day. If he doesn't, that's the bad day-to-day. But now you feel a hell of a lot better about Hero Canoe and Caden McDonald being in there than you did a few weeks ago when they were playing for Tyleek and we saw some leaks in the defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That goes back to the
Well, you didn't
depth
see
point.
a leak in the defense, so you saw some leaks. Is that
There
what
was
you're saying?
no Tyleek, therefore there were leaks.
I think this was the biggest game in terms of seeing that depth. Also on offense, Brandon Innes. We talked about it after the game. We talked about it yesterday. There's someone who, typically we're talking about the top 3 wide receivers at Ohio State. Now the top 4 are all guys that can make a game-changing impact in a matchup game, as they call them. I mean, Brandon Innes, not only did he have that touchdown catch, but he also had a catch in the fourth quarter. It was a 12-yard gain, moved the chains, and that helped set up that final field goal for Jaden Fielding. So you're seeing depth across the board and guys stepping up in those big-time atmospheres. It's one thing to play really well against Western Michigan and have a great moment under the lights, and we can all talk about the future for that player and their development. It's another thing to make a game-changing play against Penn State on the road.
There was another second-year defensive tackle 2 years ago, Tim, who made a 4th down stop at Penn State that kind of springboarded him to great things. Now Caden McDonald kind of in that same role.
Yeah, exactly. I had another thought on my brain altogether.
I'm sorry.
I like the way Ryan Day left no doubt, though, that the fumble by Will Howard going in for what should have been a touchdown ended up being a touchback. That was a bad moment. The pick 6 was just, like I said, it was when it happened, it was like, as Will Howard explained it again today, it was like he didn't see, he saw. Sometimes you see something, but it's not really what you're seeing.
Yeah.
And every quarterback has had that moment, and that was a pick 6. So you add that up, I mean, with the extra point, that's 14 points.
Yeah.
That were truly Will Howard's fault.
Yeah.
That they didn't score, and when you add them up together, one team scored.
It's a 14-point swing.
14 points is huge. No matter, you got to make all that up as this game goes on. And then on top of that, of course, the deep ball to Carnell Tate, I thought that was just barely overthrown. Carnell Tate still makes the catch, but lands on his butt out of bounds. But then the deep ball to Jeremiah Smith, as we talked about on Saturday, and Ryan Day reiterated, and Will never got to it today in any kind of question. But that was just sort of Jeremiah Smith kind of gave up on the play too early, and boom, there's the ball right in his face. He still, I think, got a fingertip on it. But my point was those were 3 touchdowns. You follow my drift? That Ohio State did not get or gave up when you accumulated. That's how close they were to just blowing out that team. The number 3 team in the country. Not a top 5 matchup. It was a top 4 matchup, 4 versus 3. And just shows you how close they are to really just being that team. I'm going to write about this a little bit just when I asked Ryan about the fact of, an example or two of when this offense has really been what you thought it would be about this year, as you put it all together with Chip Kelly and Will Howard and Quinshon Judkins and right on down the line. And that's where it's headed, I do believe. I don't think it's regressing. I think it's progressing. And a couple of, 3 or 4 plays, and it could be magnificent.
It could be magnificent. You know what else is magnificent? Going to the Game Time app using GameTime.co for all of your ticketing needs. Ohio State plays Purdue this weekend. Over there in the Horseshoe, there's plenty of tickets available. Go to GameTime.co, use the Game Time app, the Game Time Picks feature, customize the way you see all of your tickets. You find a ticket on Game Time, then you find a cheaper one in the same row, same section on a different ticketing app. You know the drill. Bring it back to Game Time. You get 110% the difference. You're making money. You're using Game Time. Use the code ON3, ON3, for $20 off your first purchase in the Game Time app. That's right, ON3, ON3, for $20 off your first purchase in the Game Time app or at GameTime.co. Game Time is the place to go for all of your last-minute ticketing needs. Okay, I think that's it. We've got Tyleik Williams injury update. We've got Carson Hinsman, Tegra Shabola left tackle talk. We've got defensive resurgence or reinvention of the wheel. Jim Knowles, kind of getting in his bag a little bit more from the Oklahoma State days. I think we can get out of here. That's the 41-year vet.
One more thing.
Perfect.
I want to say. Will Howard, the words that were used that Ryan Day said today about Will Howard I think are noteworthy. We can win any game Will Howard. I don't think that was said about a quarterback on the roster last year. And I'm not trying to get into comparisons of guys, but there's a confidence right now in this building in Will Howard, not only in his ability, but his composure and the way he bounces back from things. Every time he's made a mistake this year, remember Michigan State, that's his first real adversity he faces. Throws an interception, bounces back, gets knocked out of the game, bounces back in the second half. Every time he's had a mistake this season, he has bounced back. I think fans are getting more comfortable and trusting him that he will bounce back. But certainly coaches and players are comfortable that he will answer that call. And he talked about today, there was a turning point in his career. It was early on at Kansas State. Freshman year, he threw a pick 6 against West Virginia on the road. Went on to throw 3 picks in that game. They lost the game. 2 years later, they're back in West Virginia. He throws a pick 6, but he bounces back and he throws a couple touchdowns and he has a good game. He kind of had that as the moment where he was better at processing a mistake or a failure in game, and we've been seeing that payoff this season, and I think that's something that's definitely noteworthy.
You're also seeing his growth in situational awareness a little bit. Not that I think that he was ever bad at it, because he's a veteran player who knows what he's doing, but like I asked him today how tough it was to slide on that last run rather than take it to the house, and where a lot of people dinged him for situational awareness a few weeks ago at Oregon, he said, well, weird things happen in games, and then he just randomly, and I'm sure they've talked about this, but he brings up the North Carolina App State game from last year where North Carolina scores a touchdown to go up, I think it was 8 with a minute to go. A minute to go, instead of sliding and taking the knee and then running the clock out, App goes down and scores, kicks the onside kick, gets it, scores again, and wins the game, and North Carolina loses because they got stingy. Will Howard said in the moment he was thinking about that. He slid down because he knew that all he had to do was ice the game right there. Would he have liked to have scored a touchdown in his home state and put an exclamation point on that and maybe, launch the ball at some Penn State fan and say, I told you so? Probably. But the fact that he slid shows me that the situational awareness is good, the maturity is good, and like you said, the confidence no matter what happens in games is really good.
Yeah, and what we brought up, the Oregon game ended with him sliding on the last play.
Yeah.
Put to no avail. And this one ended with him sliding to put the icing on the cake. It's interesting. Of course, if he'd scored a touchdown, we'd put him up by 2 scores. So
Yeah.
there was no chance, I don't think, of a miracle comeback by Penn State in that regard. But no, you're exactly right. The irony of everything, of watching people learn as they play the game, as the season goes on, that's what makes college football special. And like we pointed out many times, there's so much left, in my opinion, with this offense that may come to fruition, may not, who knows. But when you got a guy like that who's learning on the fly, it speaks well. I thought it was kind of a funny question to ask a guy whether he thinks he's the guy to take him and lead them to the national championship this year. As he pointed out, would it be? Paraphrasing. It'd be stupid for me to stand up and say no, I'm not. But it did lead to some interesting conversation.
Tim May, the 41-year vet, he does it like nobody else. Andy Backstrom and me, Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you over at LettermenRow.com and the Lettermen Lounge message board, back here on the YouTube channel for more coverage of the Buckeyes, anywhere you get your podcasts, and everywhere, as Tim May likes to say, across the country and around the world. We'll see you over at LettermenRow.com, and we'll see you back in the Woody on Wednesday for more conversations about the Buckeyes.